Welcome to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. I'm Sheng Peng, editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now. I also contribute to NBC Sharks, and you can find me on Twitter at Sheng_Peng.
And I'm Keegan McNally. I'm a writer at San Jose Hockey Now. You can find me at Twitter at halfwall_hockey. I'm also the owner of halfwallhockey.com if you ever want to check out some hockey writing there. I spent the last week on beautiful Lake Champlain, which is what every good hockey writer should do if they are finding themselves trying to get some inspiration in a very slow off season.
Yeah, I'm not the regular hockey writer, and unfortunately, I don't have a cottage like everybody else does.
Gotta get a cottage in the middle of nowhere, or else you're gonna be burning up. Actually, that's how hot it's been.
Yeah, but luckily, though, I live in San Francisco. This is actually the main reason why I don't live in San Jose. Today, I was able to take a hike in the evening in 55-degree weather in the fog in Pacifica, which is a beach town right south of San Francisco.
Wow. Amazing. It's the hottest week on record. And it might have been the coldest week. This is a good transition. The coldest week for Sharks news in a little while, at least.
Mm-hmm.
We have a few things to talk about tonight. But we're going to start off with letting you know that we have later on tonight a Nico Sturm interview, basically where he talks about his recent silver medal win at the World Championships and a little bit about the Sharks' tough season.
And then also too, talked with Nico too a little later about Leon Gawanke, and so I have a couple of thoughts from Nico about Leon, his Team Germany teammate, coming up a little bit later.
Yeah, and we got the pronunciation on point this time. It's Gawanke. I think we're gonna slide right through to the season on that one. This week, we also have some Erik Karlsson, I won't call it news, but some speculation to keep us going through these off-season weeks.
Keep us warm, right? Because it's not never a cold news day if there's Erik Karlsson report.
Exactly, and it's not hot enough here. And we have two Shark signings to talk about this week, and all of that and more this week on the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. So, Sheng, let's start with Erik Karlsson. You might have heard of him. You might know him. The much talked about trade target for this summer. Where are we in a trade with Erik Karlsson?
Well, it depends on, I guess, who you talk to, but the most recent sort of report or more recent one, Frank Saravalli talked on, I think, Toronto radio, and he kind of he is pessimistic about a Karlsson deal even happening. And so I think for a while we sort of assumed that a deal was going to happen. And the way he's talking, well, maybe it won't happen. And what he said exactly, and I wrote about it in a recent story on San Jose Hockey Now about Karlsson's preference being perhaps Pittsburgh, but there's questions about whether a deal will even be done. But what Frank said on the radio was essentially that Karlsson wants to trade, the Sharks want to move him, but it's not sure that it's going to happen. And the main reason is because the Sharks are still asking for a lot at just 20% retained. And 20% retained with Karlsson turns his 11.5 million AAV into about 9.5 million AAV.
Sure.
And Frank said that he has real doubts as to whether or not that's going to change. And he thinks that teams have a lot of doubts about that too. Elliot Friedman has said something different, I think, a couple of days before that, saying that the more the Sharks retain, he thinks that as long as the offers improve drastically, or if the offers improve drastically, then the Sharks will retain more. But anyway, so we're kind of in sort of a standstill. I think I think a couple or a week ago or so, I wrote a story about sort of already kind of in a game of chicken now, kind of seeing what the Sharks will retain,
Seems
who's
like
going to
it.
make a move, right? Kind
Yep.
of right.
Yep.
And so that's kind of where it appears that we're kind of at. Just for example, though, going further with what Frank said. Frank suggested that right now the Sharks at where they're at, retaining at 20%, that Pittsburgh was kind of like, well, we'll take them like just for that money, sure. But
Yeah.
we're not going to give you much back. We don't have much to give in the first place, but
True.
but we can't, yeah, we can't afford to give you much anyway. But what we can do for you is just take Karlsson off your hands, and you can retain a minimal amount, which sounds at first like, oh, you want the 2023 Norris Trophy winner for wait, for
Nothing.
free,
Yeah.
and all you want us to retain 2 million a year.
Yeah, you want them on a bargain, and also
Yeah.
we have to keep that 20%. That doesn't really like sit well with, I'm sure, Mike Greer or with Sharks.
But on the other hand, though, at this
Mhm.
time last year, if a team went up to the Sharks and said, "We'll take Karlsson off your hands," at that point it was 5 years left at 9.5 million, and Sharks retain 2 million, and we'll take him off your hands for nothing.
They might have said yes.
Oh, they would have said yes. I bet. I
So
bet.
yeah, so
So
I think that's kind of a big issue with basically the timeline here, is that we're going to keep going through these summer weeks, right? And the closer we get to training camp, the closer we get to the season.
mhm.
If Erik Karlsson does not perform if he plays for the Sharks, he doesn't perform like he did last year, we're stuck in an even worse situation.
Or he gets hurt again.
Where he gets hurt, he is completely untradeable. And I think, all the GMs in the league are pretty smart. They know that too. And they
hmm
know that they might just be able to wait it out. And I think you had a point last week that we talked about. The bidding war is really the important thing. Like with Timo, we had these few teams that were trying to compete, and they got into like a mini bidding war, but it didn't really drive enough up, right?
Escalate, yeah, and the
Yeah.
teams in it didn't have a lot to offer. Besides New Jersey, didn't have a lot to offer.
So now we're getting into a situation where it seems like there's two front runners, right? And if they don't start kind of like outbidding each other, or something getting like kind of close with one team, they might just wait, all the other GMs out. Like they might just
Right,
continue to
right.
push it out.
Just two teams bidding isn't enough. Frank
Mhm.
did suggest that a number of teams have talked with Erik Karlsson directly, so more than two. But in
Sure.
terms of teams that have shown actual trade interest, we only know of two. If it remains at two, and we'll talk about this a little later. A little later, we're going to talk about Keegan and I. We both had Erik Karlsson trade proposal stories, so we're going to kind of get into that and critique each other's proposals. But
Mhm.
anyway, though, in my Carolina Hurricanes proposal story, I talked with a source, and the source suggested to me that the Hurricanes are just sort of hanging around, waiting for a bargain to happen. They don't necessarily, Carlson's not plan A for them. Maybe for
Sure.
Pittsburgh, Carlson's plan A, but for Carolina, maybe he isn't. And so if they can't get him at a bargain price, like they got Brent Burns last year, that they're not going to be in it much longer. And if that is the case, then that leaves one team interested in Carlson at the moment. And that obviously doesn't portend well for Carlson's return. On the
Yeah.
other hand, though, and people will say this, like, we don't know if how much our market opens up if the Sharks retain a lot more. In my
That's very
stories I've been
true.
writing, I've suggested 40%. Would it open up the market a lot more? People online seem convinced that it will. I don't know that for sure,
Sure.
but
It's still a
yeah.
risk, and you still have to move pieces around, even at,
hmm
unless it is true 50%, and even
Right,
then,
right,
putting in $5.75
right.
million is a lot at this point when you've already signed all your free agents and you're kind of gearing up towards, training camp.
I want to
If
add too, yeah, and I mentioned this I think on the first podcast, like
Mhm.
any team would take a chance on or would try to at least take a chance at Erik Karlsson if it was 4 years and his AAV was say 7 million. I think any team would consider that.
Sure.
But the question isn't just a team taking on that contract, right? It's also like, okay, take on that contract with the risk involved, right, with Karlsson. And also, too, the Sharks
Mhm.
want a first-round pick and a grade B prospect and this and that, right?
True.
And that's where teams are like, well,
Mhm.
we will take the risk, but we don't want to give you stuff, or we don't want to give you as much as you want, right? And so
Yeah.
that's a big part of it. So when people assume that the Sharks retain more, that's automatically going to open up the floodgates of a trade. It'll help for sure, but I'm not convinced that necessarily is going to be floodgates.
Now, I got a question
Hmm.
because I think a lot of people have asked this question, and I have like some theories or why they don't want to do it. And Mike Greer also said why
Hmm.
they don't want to do it. But why do you think the Sharks don't want to retain more? And Greer has mentioned it. He says it's Hasso's money, and it
Yeah,
might be related to a Hasso Plattner, the Sharks owner decision, rather than like a Mike Greer decision. Do you think that's
right.
like end all be all of the reason?
Yeah. I mean, I can see that to some degree. I mean, Elliot Friedman reported, and I wrote about that too.
Hmm.
And Mike Greer told me, it was actually off of my question. I asked about what Hasso's involvement it was in this. I think it was before the draft.
Yeah,
And anyway, yeah, Hasso I'm sorry, Mike said that in terms of retaining half or whatever. He just said that's a lot of money, and it's Hasso's money. And Elliot Friedman said the same thing, and Elliot added that the Hasso is more involved than usual in this.
hmm
Now, I would
hmm
say in that same story, Elliot Friedman, or that podcast that Elliot was talking about it, that I wrote a story about. Elliot said very clearly though that the Sharks do understand that the more they retain, the more that they get.
sure.
But I don't know if it's one of those things where, like, if the Sharks retain, say, a 40%, if they won't go up to 50%, that has to be a real knockout deal.
Hmm.
Whereas teams are willing to, give what they think is a fair deal, which is, my proposals and your proposal, I think are more along those lines, instead of like a knockout proposal. So,
Yeah. And I think we'll get to our proposals in a minute, but it
mhm.
feels like if the Sharks don't want to retain a ton of money, and the only way to make these deals work is to kind of finagle the cap in a certain way, that there's going to be a few things that might have to happen. And that means either taking on a contract that is not so valuable in the NHL
Right.
currently, or finding out a different team to get involved into this trade. So,
Yep. Yeah, well, we'll talk about that too. Like, after we critique each other's trade proposals, we're also going to
mhm,
talk about the third team,
yeah,
and what that third team might be, who that third team might be,
sure.
and sort of deals around that. But
So let's start with our trade proposals. So the two
yes.
teams are Pittsburgh and Carolina, which are leading
Hmm.
the pack for Erik Karlsson. I had put out a story this week on just what I thought might be getting enough from both sides to say
Hmm.
yes to. Essentially the trade that I outlined. Do you want to read it off, Sheng, if you've got it in front of you?
Sure. It's Erik Karlsson to Pittsburgh, 2 million retained with Jacob McDonald.
Jacob McDonald's there because Jacob McDonald is kind of like your can fit him in anywhere, literally all positions except for
Sure,
goalie.
sure.
And he's
Yeah,
just kind of a
maybe,
guy
man,
that
maybe he
might
can
be
play that.
useful.
Yeah, we don't
Yeah.
know.
Mhm.
And to San Jose, you have in this is yeah,
Yeah, it's an
alphabetical order.
alphabetical.
Corey Andonovsky.
Yep, kind of like an AHL guy. Just has a
Yeah,
lot
yeah, it
of.
looks like it's just sort of a fodder kind of. I don't. Does he even
Mhm.
have an NHL contract?
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Okay, so it'll just be getting a contract off, probably
Mhm.
off the books there. Joe Blomqvist, the goalie.
Yep.
Mikhail Granlund, who has 2 years left at 5 million.
Yep.
Emil, how do you say
Yarventi.
it? Yarventi? Emil Yarventi.
He was the
S-
seventh round pick for this year
right,
for
right, right.
the Penguins.
Or yeah, Penguins. Jeff Petrie, who's got 2 years left at I think 6.25 million.
Mhm.
Owen Pickering, who was Pittsburgh's first round pick last year, and a 2024 first, 2024 fourth, and 2025 second.
Yes. So I think my reasoning behind it essentially is this: the Sharks want to stay at 2 million retained or so. It seems like the only way that's going to happen, and even Frank mentioned it, hey, we'll take him for free. The only way that the Sharks are going to get anything really back is to also take back stuff that the other team doesn't want, right?
Right.
Mikael Granlund seems to be somebody that the Pittsburgh might want to move
Right.
in the trade.
Granlund and Petrie.
Yeah, he's making $5 million times 2 years. Petrie's making six, something like that,
Yeah,
6.25 for
6.25, I
two.
believe. Yeah.
And his production's on the decline. He's also a little bit older. He would basically be replaced by Erik Karlsson anyways on their team.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, the only way that I think the Sharks can get that second round pick that they're going to want from this kind of trade is if they take back some contracts. What they do with them, and then there's some problems with basically how they get those contracts because of Petrie having a no trade clause. Essentially, it's a 15-team no trade clause.
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not the Sharks are on there, the world may never know. But it might be that the Sharks are not on there and he's free and clear to be traded. Granlund doesn't have any trade protection, so he is able to be traded without any kind of issues there. But my thoughts are basically, if we're trying to get value for this, this might be the only way for the Sharks to do it.
Well, any way without retaining much, yeah.
Without retention. And I think the key there is you're not retaining for those 4 years. You're essentially retaining for the 2 that you're taking on Petrie and Granlund, who you might be able to flip anyways for future assets.
Yeah, in the second year of those deals, maybe, yeah.
For sure, yeah. But what do you think?
Yeah. So, I think that the sort of, if you tie in the first round pick with Petrie and the first round pick for Granlund, that's not unfair for that amount of a salary commitment. The other stuff I might like kind of argue with, because then, okay, let's say you associate the first with the first and Pickering, basically 2 firsts, with Petrie and Granlund. And so then the rest of it is kind of for Karlsson and the 2 million retained. That's a bit rich, I would say. A second round pick and Blomqvist was a pretty good goalie prospect. Not a great one, but a legit one. For basically Karlsson and McDonald, right? So I think that might be a little bit rich. And again, Andonovsky is just a throw-in. Järventie, I even though he's just a 7th-round pick, teams usually don't trade guys that they literally just drafted, 2 weeks ago. So I do find that a little unlikely too. But you can find a similar, like maybe Pittsburgh's 7th-round pick last year. That
it's kind of just like an extra prospect pick, that kind of thing. I put them in as more like filler placeholder guys that
right. But just when a team drafts a guy, they want to see him for a year, right? So before they decide,
for
to kick him to the curb. So I think though my question with this though is that I think it's close to fair. I think like maybe you take out the 2nd round pick or turn it to a 3rd or whatever, right? Something like that, right? I think the value seems pretty fair. But I do question too, because Pittsburgh really doesn't have a lot to trade, right? Their 2 best prospects right now are Pickering and Jaeger, who they just drafted. This past draft. They're not going to trade Jaeger off; they just drafted him. And then those are their only 2, like sort of. I think those are their only 2 like sort of top 150 prospects, in the world kind of guys.
But Joseph's a little
bit older though, right? I'm not sure what his ceiling
22.
is.
I think he's 22, 23, but I think Pittsburgh might want to keep him just because he's coming into his own. He's on his ELC, so he's cheap, and basically they're going to need him to compete if they want him with Karlsson anyways. So I don't know if he's going to be the one to put into a trade. Maybe, but possibly not.
Yeah. So yeah, like you mentioned, the fact that he's on an ELC, I don't know what his ceiling is exactly though. Also too, because from what I've understood about him, he hasn't really quite lived up to his draft billing, and maybe he is sort of now. But does that mean that he is like a bottom pairing-ish defenseman? Okay, or does he have actual top 4 potential like Pickering? I think is seen to have, at least at the moment. That would be the one thing that I would say that like I'm not sure that
I think in the world of prospects, I don't think Pickering is like Kevin Korchinski or like
Oh
the
no,
guys
no,
that
no.
were
I'm not
drafted.
suggesting that, but
But
like
he's just kind of like only one that Pittsburgh
they
really
have
could
they have two
dangle
legit
too.
prospects that like teams would ask about probably right
Yeah,
now,
we're
right?
not getting
Jaeger
Jaeger, so we're gonna
and
throw all the
Pickering.
Jaeger proposals out the window.
Yeah, yeah. So that's like that's what I'm saying. Like I like Pickering is probably like he may not even be a top 100 prospect. He's probably in the group of like Scott Morrow, Carolina, right? Like who
Sure.
was kind of debated about during the Timo Meyer stuff, right?
Yeah.
So in that range, right? Like so he would be kind of like a like B minus prospect, like compared to like Muku Madulin, who's a strong B, right?
Yeah,
Something like
B
that, right?
plus, something like that.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. So yeah, so I'm not trying to suggest Pickering is like a huge deal, but like when you have
Mhm.
nobody,
Yeah.
um, then yeah, like that kind of there's a little more shine for the guys you actually have, and you're a little more loath to trade them, especially when you're just basically adding them as a salary dump too, along Granlund and Petrie, right? And so what is basically two Pittsburgh trading two first to dump the salary. That sounds like that could be sort of like, well, a little bit rich for them.
Yeah, but they
But
are also getting a Norris Trophy winner on the back end of it. So
sure,
yeah,
yeah, no, I don't question that, and I think Dubas does like. Oh, we know that Dubas likes Carlson a lot, and
yeah,
that unlike I mentioned Carolina, like uh Carlson is it looks like a plan, that they're plan A, unlike with the Hurricanes, which I don't feel like Carlson is necessarily their plan A.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, so that might put it over to the top. But again, though, like a first and arguably your best prospect or second best your prospect, certainly your best defensive prospect, right?
For sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
That's what
pretty
I wonder about.
it's pretty rich. I think it would have to be where they get to a point that they just really need to get this deal done because of the length of time that it's been,
Hmm.
and that they've already committed to these kind of talks, right? So
Sure.
if somehow Mike Gear can kind of get into this conversation, because it sounds like they don't want to trade him for nothing, and the only offers out there are literally
Nothing.
nothing. So it's going to be kind of like,
Like Marc-Andre Fleury, right? When he
yeah.
got traded
So,
from
and
Vegas to Chicago.
I don't think they want to do that. I think somehow they're going to have to get creative in taking on some bad contracts to get some draft capital or get some prospect capital back.
Right,
Just
right.
don't think it's
And
going to
maybe
happen.
that'll be more palatable for Hassel because at least you're getting players in Granlund and Petrie who are NHL players who
Yeah,
can bounce back and be
sure.
of some value, with more playing time and more trust and more rope and whatever. Granlund would well, he would be a top winger for the Sharks. Not the top winger, but he'd be up there if he played wing.
Sure.
And at
Yeah.
center, he'd actually be pretty good 3C still. I mean, he's not a guy who's completely fallen off.
Yeah.
And Petrie has fallen off a bit, but Petrie used to be very legitimate like number two defenseman, a very very
Yeah.
good defenseman.
Yeah.
And so if he finds a little bit of that game, then he's very movable in the second year. If he's playing a high level of hockey in the second year of his expiring contract, yeah, right-handed defenseman, plays 20 minutes a night. If he's doing that well, yeah, he's very movable.
So, did you have a specific Pittsburgh proposal?
Yeah, I did.
What is your Pittsburgh proposal?
So my Pittsburgh proposal, and no thanks to some of the cloud chasers who turned my proposal into. They claimed that it was a real offer that was on the table. So
Oh
I'm not
no.
gonna say the names of any of those Instagram or Twitter sites,
Mhm.
yeah, that I'm gonna say though that takes the fun out of coming up with like good proposals because then
Yeah, we got to like put a big warning up on all of this stuff that
oh,
this
I
is
did.
speculation.
I did with my article.
For sure.
The title is speculation.
Yeah, I mean
That's the yeah that's the title, speculation. What's a reasonable Carlson and Penguins trade? And multiple times within the article, actually right before I say the proposal, I say keep in mind this is just pure speculation,
We're gonna
not a
say it
report.
again. We're gonna
It's
say it
not
again
a,
here.
it's not for a lack of writing on my
Shoot.
part.
No, for sure.
It's not for a lack of reading comprehension by the people who are stealing it. It's just,
Yeah.
they're just trying to chase clout, and hey, this looks reasonable, and this is thought, and this was, like concocted or dreamt up by actual beat writer around the team, and he did vet it with people too, like NHL scouts, executive, whatever, right?
Sure.
So like, yeah, so this seems legit. I'm gonna put this out there, and I actually, to go on with sort of this aside or whatever, like this reminds me of sort of like the I had an article about a month ago, right, about Will Smith before the Sharks drafted him,
Yeah.
and the title of the article, very clearly, I thought, but maybe not for some people, but the title of the article was it was a source, because I had a source at the draft combine that was telling me some interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that well, the title of the article is source, Sharks leaning towards Smith at number 4, question mark. I'm gonna repeat that again, question mark. And
Not period.
I saw again the same kind of people, cloud chasers, and look, if you want to steal my stuff, I mean, that's okay. And one of them that took it did credit me, so that's fine, but what he put up was Sharks leaning towards Smith at number 4 without that question mark, and that changes it.
Yeah, that
Right, that
completely different
changes
story.
materially what
Yeah.
I'm saying, right? Like, and so anyway, like what the scout I'm sorry, what the source told me at the draft combine, he said, and I quote, from my source, rumor is Will Smith is flying to San Jose for a tour. He sounds like the Sharks guy. Now, I debunked that rumor myself within
Mm-hmm.
a week. That Will Smith was indeed not flying to San Jose for a tour. Like the 2 weeks before the draft, he didn't, right?
Yeah.
But I also noted in the story that I wrote about that doesn't mean that he's not the Sharks guy, like that Sharks don't like him, like I was fairly certain that the Sharks liked him.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same story too, I'll mention too that my source, he's the one that told me that the Montreal was actually from what he had heard at the combine, that Montreal was interested in Reinbacher or Leonard. And that, yeah, like they ended up drafting Reinbacher, of course, right?
Sure.
And that tidbit he told me was, a day before anyone else had it, that Montreal was interested in Reinbacher or Leonard. I believe it was. I know the Athletic had a story the next day, Athletic Montreal,
Sure.
and same information, but yeah, but anyway, I had it on a day. But the point was that a couple of the points is that the information was good from my source, obviously, right?
Sure.
But
Things change.
when I write it though, right? Like I try to be very careful because it's a source telling me this, but it's not like, big reveal. It wasn't Mike Greer telling me the Sharks were leaning towards Smith at number 4.
Yeah.
Big reveal. It wasn't Kent Hughes telling me that the Canadians were thinking about Reinbacher or Leonard,
Yeah.
right?
No, there's still some
And
speculation here for sure.
yeah, it was informed speculation.
Yeah.
A person that was at the combine, like a person who's connected, etc., right?
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
just any person who's just attending the combine. It wasn't like a writer, or anything like that, right? It was it was somebody who works in the hockey ops industry, etc., in that realm, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, so to see though that reporting and that very key like question, Sharks leaning towards Smith at number 4, it's still a question though. That's the point. Like
Yeah.
I believe
These are
that's the
still
case.
speculations.
Yeah, I believe
Yeah.
that's the case, but yeah. And so anyway, to me, going back to the Karlsson trade proposal and that kind of stuff, for people to jump to trying to report that was an actual an actual trade that was on the table. Yeah, it's frustrating. So,
I
but
can't wait for the article about this podcast where somebody has said, San Jose Sharks beat writer says that the the Penguins are going to trade Owen Pickering a first and a second,
right.
and basically. But no, I think it should just be all with a big grain of salt for this conversation specifically. Sometimes when we're trying to tell you actual sourced information, we definitely will.
We
But
will say, yeah.
But for now, I think we're clearly in proposal land.
And so anyway, okay, so my proposal was Erik Karlsson. A lot more retention than the Sharks have shown to be willing to, but it might
Sure.
be what they need to get to, though. Erik Karlsson and the Sharks retain 40% of the remaining 4 years of his contract. That's $4.5 million per season. And to the Sharks would go Jeff Petrie, and once again, 2 years left at $6.25 million. Penguins 2024 first round pick, top 5 protected.
Okay.
Ty Smith, who was
Smith.
a pretty good defensive prospect with the Devils a couple of years ago and was 7th in the Calder voting, I think, in the COVID year 2020-21. But he's fallen off a bit and couldn't quite crack the Penguins lineup last year. Spent most of last year in Wilkes-Barre.
He had a very rough year.
Had a rough year, but he is the type that the Sharks need too. They're missing somebody to run their power play. He's young. So so he's sort of a reclamation project, but was a first round pick. Sam Poulin too, another former first round pick, 2019 first round pick, and he's really a bit of a more long shot. Unlike Ty Smith, who has good tape with the Devils, right? Maybe not so much for the Penguins. Sam Poulin has been a slow developing. Probably not going to reach sort of the potential that he had when the Pens drafted him. I think 21st or something like that in 2019. But maybe there's an angel player in there still, maybe. And anyway, the last part of the deal is a Penguins 2025 second round pick that would upgrade to a first round pick if essentially the Pittsburgh wins the 2024 or 2025 Stanley Cup and Karlsson plays half of the playoff games in the championship winning run. And just the basic reasoning of it, or just the way I saw this, is that the 2024 first round pick was basically the Sharks' reward for taking on Jeff Petrie in his contract.
Yeah,
and
the first for dump swap.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And then the rest of the deal is basically kind of a souped up version of what the Sharks got for Brent Burns. And if you recall, for Brent Burns, the Sharks retained 34%, $2.7 million per year, and they got back a fourth line forward, Steven Lawrence. They got back a goalie prospect that they like, but has had some injury troubles in Etu Makiniemi, and a third round pick. And so definitely Penguins second round pick that could upgrade to a first if I'm sure the Penguins won't mind giving up a first if Karlsson leads them to the Stanley Cup. That's definitely an upgrade on the third. And I think Ty Smith and his upside is probably an upgrade, or is an upgrade, I think, on Lawrence and Makiniemi. And Poulin's just sort of in there. You can, I think he's a little interchangeable. But yeah, so anyway, that's the basic reasoning of that.
I like the first for Granlund thing. I think that kind of
Petrie.
I'm sorry, first for Petrie. I like that portion of it, and I like the Ty Smith reclamation project thing, because that is something that organizations typically do in this kind of thing. Is they try and get the guy that's struggling, that needs a new home. Whether or not that's from their own goodwill or not, or just basically like, this guy still has value, let's try and sell him, kind of thing.
Right.
But it does happen a lot, so it's realistic in that aspect, because it's very frequently done. I think that the amount retained is still a lot, and I think that the Carolina deal that you had is similar retention, right?
It's 34%. It's a lot less money, obviously, because
sure.
Burns' contract is smaller. Again, it was 34% at 2.7
Yeah.
million AAV retention a year.
Yeah. And
But it's
it's
close,
just,
though.
it's close. And it's possible that they get to that number. But I feel like Karlsson at 7 million is worth more. And I worry that, I'm not worried, but I just feel like it would be a little underwhelming from a Sharks fan perspective, but I get the reasons why it would happen.
I'm not convinced other teams think so, though, because like I mentioned, like, yeah, the contract's great, 7 million, right? That's why you're getting like possible first and like a decentish prospect in Ty Smith.
Yeah.
But you know, with all the risk though involved with Karlsson, whatnot, I'm not so convinced that
Teams
that
really consider
there's
it a
going to be
value.
a line of yeah, because again, like,
Yeah.
and I use this example in the next proposal we're going to talk about. In the story I wrote about the Hurricanes and my proposal there, right? Like, um, yes, Erik Karlsson had a season for the ages. He had arguably just as good a season relative to his peers, his defensive peers, as Connor McDavid had this year, right? But
Mhm.
very quickly, let's look at what Connor McDavid has done the last 7 years. Last 7 years, he's been a top 5 Hart finalist every single year.
Yep.
He has won 3 MVP trophies in the last 7 years, and he's only missed 13 regular season games in the last 7 years, and he's also just 26.
Hmm.
So Karlsson, we don't need to. I'm not trying to take down Karlsson, but the reality of it is that he is a huge risk. I don't care how good he was last year.
Yep.
Um, and it's not a matter of like I don't care. Like it's an emotional thing. It's I don't. The teams don't care.
Yeah.
That's a huge risk with him because Karlsson's much older, has a far more significant injury history,
For
and
sure.
perhaps most importantly, I mean, all those things are really important. Just hasn't been consistent, the last 7 years. So using that 7-year timeline, so Karlsson has had 2 top 5 Norris finishes in the last 7 years. The first one was the first year of the 2017, and then the last one was obviously this past year. In between, though, there was a top 15 finish, there was a top 12 finish, and then there was 3 years where he wasn't even close.
Yeah.
And so this is not the same sort of reliability, right? That
Hmm.
Connor McDavid has. And even, I use the Brent Burns example, right? Like, and I've said this many times too, so I'm kind of repeating myself, but like, yes, Burns was 4 years older than Karlsson. Yes, Burns was coming off a good season with the Sharks in 2021-22, but certainly not a Norris Trophy
His
caliber
best.
season,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But on the other hand, though, Burns has not missed a game since 2013.
Yeah.
So things kind of balance each other out. You know what I mean? So, like,
And
yeah, when you trade for Brent
Burns
Burns, you're
can
not. Go ahead.
Burns starfishing aside can play some like decent defense.
Well, Karlsson, I think, used to be able to play better, or used to
Yeah.
play better defense too.
I
Like
think
when he
he's
first
just
came to
been
San Jose
let the
and
chain off,
in
basically.
Ottawa, but I think he just got a little older. Yeah, it's just a little bit of
Yeah.
a trade off with his body and what his body can do. And so,
Yeah.
but yeah, Burns, I think, yeah, is better defensively than Karlsson right now too, even after this, past season, Karlsson winning the Norris. But yeah,
Mhm.
Burns basically, like, as long as he doesn't fall off the aging curve, which obviously is very possible when a guy is 37, and that
Sure.
that was a very reasonable fear for teams last summer trading for Burns. But as long as he doesn't do that, uh, you know, again, always been healthy, good, like just you kind of just like had a better feeling for what you're gonna get from Burns,
I
probably.
think it's a
I think.
consistency factor for
Yeah.
sure. I think there's something that should be said about the type of offense that Burns creates that is more, like, I guess not translatable, but more consistent. And there was also those years with Karlsson where he was, so down with San Jose that were on full display that
Yeah.
teams are going to be taking notice of.
Right. Like,
Those
there were
big teams
years
like
that Carlson was legitimately, I think, bad, especially
yeah,
granted, a lot of stuff going on in a COVID year for everybody, 2021, but he wasn't good that year.
yeah. So
Burns' game has sloped off from when he was a Norris finalist in 2019,
mhm,
but it was a kind of a gradual decline where, I
yeah,
think he was still a very good defenseman, still a easy top 4 defenseman on any team in
yeah.
those years. He just wasn't the Brent Burns of like 29 goal Brent Burns and that kind of, Brent Burns. But
So
so yeah.
Pittsburgh appears to be the like the front runner, right? Like the team that really, really wants Karlsson. Carolina
Yeah, I
may
mean
seem
Carolina's
to,
in there, but
yeah.
yeah.
So let's mention Carolina. Carolina kind of feels like you said the team that's kind of just waiting to see if they
Hmm.
can get a sort of bargain maybe on Erik Karlsson here, like they did with Brent Burns, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
your Carolina proposal was I'll pull it up here,
Sure.
40% retained again,
Hmm.
for so basically Erik Karlsson at 7 million for the next 4 years. Uh, to the San Jose Sharks would go Toivo Teravainen, the Hurricanes 2024 first round pick, lottery protected,
Hmm.
Jack Drury, and a Hurricanes 2024 third round pick.
Right.
Teravainen had kind of a down year, so I think that's why his name is kind of getting brought up in these proposals, is because his numbers for his contract, which I think is north of 5 million or 6 million.
Yeah, it's 5.4, and
5 million, yeah, 5 million, yeah.
granted, he's only 28.
Mm-hmm.
And before this past season, in 4 of the 5 past seasons, I think he popped in over 60 points.
Yeah,
So his contract is not as sort of loathsome as like Mikhail Granlund's or Jeff
sure.
Petry's. And so it's more of a just like, instead of, I don't know if it's an out of bad contract, it's more of a so-so contract, right?
Yeah, and
But
somebody that they could get for free or get a team to take probably for free. Like
yeah,
if Carolina wanted to, they could probably trade
yeah,
Teravainen
I could see that. I could see that.
for
Yeah.
like maybe retain a little, or maybe attach like a fourth and get a fifth back or something like that, where they like give up a little value, but he seems like he's got enough value, and he's only 28 that he might go to a team for free. But
Right,
in a
right,
trade like
right, right,
this, where the money's got to move somewhere, it makes sense to send him back
right.
to the Sharks.
And I might have been too aggressive with that. Then, like with Teravainen, I saw the Hurricanes setting a third round pick
Hmm.
as sort of the reward for taking on his so-so
Sure.
contract. But you're right though. Like you know, he's only had one bad year. He's much younger. He's only got 1 year left in his deal too. So that was part of the draw, I thought, for the Sharks. That like if he bounces back, and obviously we know that on the wing the Sharks have a lot of opportunity, that he would be easy to flip.
Yeah,
For
for sure.
something good at the deadline. Also, too, Teravainen, I think, is underrated. He's a good two-way player. Good two-way wingers. Played a lot on the power play, obviously, but also the penalty kill. And so, he is an underrated asset in that sense too.
Hmm.
Um, the rest of the deal, I kind of saw. So basically, Drury and the first round pick, right?
Hmm.
And that is sort of the trade directly for Karlsson. Kind of. On the ice, but taking in consideration the risk of his contract too. And Drury is a guy that, from what I've heard, the Sharks like
Yeah,
and have liked, and makes sense for a lot of the obvious reasons. Drury comes from a Boston hockey family. Ted Drury is his dad. Chris Drury, I believe, is his uncle. Jack Drury played at Harvard. And he's also seen as a kind of a high compete, high character player. His
sure.
upside may not be, very high, but he's a guy that you hope you can see slotting into like your third line center or fourth line center for a long time if things work out. And so yeah, so that seems like a guy that they would try to pull away from the Hurricanes. And of course, Hurricanes would have a lot of reasons to want to keep him because he's young and he's cheap.
Yeah.
Um, and finally, I guess with going back to Teravainen, the Hurricanes, if you look at their their Puckpedia page, I mean, they don't have a lot of bad contracts. They've really
They
been
really
a
don't.
great,
Yeah,
very disciplined.
for
They've
sure.
obviously like been lucky too, right?
Mm.
But the contracts that people like think that they have to get rid of, just because, not that they had to get rid of them, but just because these guys have only 1 year left and are about to go UFA, are Teravainen, Brady Shea, and Brett Pesce, who's been in a lot of rumors.
Yep.
And Pesce and Shea actually have a lot of value still, though. If the
Yeah.
Hurricanes wanted to trade them straight up, they would get very high picks. Like Pesce, I think, is a little more regarded than Shea, even though Shea had 18 goals last year. But both like maybe a late first for Pesce, maybe a second in that range for a Shea. At least that's what one scout that I talked to suggested to me. Whereas Teravainen, obviously, maybe you had to attach something to trade him or get nothing for him or something in that range.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of their only option unless they do this is also a very good segue. We've got good segues today. Unless there's a third team involved, essentially where a third team is involved, where a team would move somebody like Petri, Granlund, Teravainen.
But you didn't give me a reaction to
I did.
my Hurricanes proposal.
You're absolutely right. So I like the Carolina proposal. I just like Jack Drury as a player. I enjoy watching him, so I like it a little bit more. But I like it. It does seem fair. I think it's realistic because it feels like a deal that Carolina would bite at. Like they'd say, okay, we're getting Karlsson at 40%, and it's only going to cost us a first and like a third, and we get out of Teravainen, and it feels like they might bite at. So it feels realistic to me in a sense.
Yeah, a source mentioned to me that he thought that Teravainen and Drury were players that they would part with. So to improve their team. Not that they're looking to trade Teravainen and Drury, but those are parts that are sort of are available for the right player, and maybe that right player is Erik Karlsson.
Yep, and Carolina also just has and it's kind of sad because I wish Carolina was the team that was pushing for Karlsson, because they have like a wealth of prospect capital. They've been drafting pretty well, at least or it seems pretty well over the past few years, and every year they seem to pick new internet darlings in terms of drafted prospects. So I still like Jack Drury though, and I think it would be a realistic and decent trade for the Sharks.
Which one do you like more, the Pittsburgh one or the Carolina one? If you're Mike Greer and Erik Karlsson, even though the report is that Erik Karlsson prefers Pittsburgh, but if Erik Karlsson's willing to go to both places, which deal do you take?
I'd take the Pittsburgh deal. I think just the second possibility of a first round pick is.
Oh, but then you got to take on more money. That's the reason why the Carolina deal is a little lighter because than the Pittsburgh proposal, because Teravainen only has 1 year left, whereas Petrie has got 2 years. So there's obviously a bit more of a commitment there.
Yeah, I think they also would use Petrie. Like Teravainen is fine on the Sharks, but I think Petrie would actually fill a role at the Sharks that they would need, like basically just a defenseman to put up points, which they don't really have right now. So I think just from a team perspective, he'd probably be like, all right, I can at least use this for right now. And then if he still maintains some value in a year, he can sell him as well.
Well, heck, if that Pittsburgh proposal came to pass, Petrie and Ty Smith could immediately be the Sharks' top offensive defenseman, like 1-2 on the power play. Immediately.
The ultimate goal, I think, is to get another first-round pick for 2024, because I think no matter what, the Sharks are going to have a pretty down year if they do trade Karlsson, and I think having more and more in this next draft is the most important thing for the Sharks. Okay, so if the Sharks are not the ones that are going to take on your Petrie, your Granlund, your Teravainen, your Pesce, they do take it on, you mean? Yeah, if they take them on, is there a role for a third team to kind of be an outlet for those players? Right?
Yeah, and that's what a source said to me yesterday or 2 days ago. He said flat out, I heard it's going to take 3 teams to get it done. So
it seems 3-team trades are very rare, I'd say, but it's like
I try to avoid them because they sound like just like made up on an internet kind of trades a lot of times. But
I think once you involve that 13, the possibilities are endless, right? But let's kind of dive into what we might see, like if that was a thing, right? So somebody believes that it will take a third team. I guess there's 2 ways to think about it. They take a salary dump or a player from Carolina or Pittsburgh, they put them on somewhere else.
Petrie, Granlund, the Petrie, Granlund, Teravainen types,
Yep. Or we have like a retention deal where Karlsson is laundered through a third team to Carolina or Pittsburgh with retention.
Right.
Let's talk about the first scenario first. Basically, because I think it's a little bit more realistic and something that's actually happened before, rather than the retention, which I don't think has
Mhm.
happened in that way.
Not quite the way I have it envisioned, but
Mhm.
the one, like, you go, yeah, you go at it first, and then I have sort of an argument against the idea of acquiring a Petrie and then rerouting him, unless of course he doesn't want to be in San Jose. He's on the no trade list, but
Yeah, I mean that would be one. Let's start with Petrie. I think
yeah.
common destination I've seen is Seattle as well. I don't know if you've seen that one,
Hmm.
where they're looking for, um, Seattle's kind of in this weird spot where they're competitive already out of nowhere, and they kind of want to keep it going. And
Sure.
I think they need another offensive defenseman, or at least somebody to put some points up on their blue line. So Petrie to Seattle, uh, basically rerouting the Sharks, so not coming to the Sharks but going to them, and then we take on the prospects and picks that we get from Pittsburgh because of it. Um,
Hmm.
so it's kind of like a free Petrie to Seattle, and then we the Sharks get the picks, and then Pittsburgh gets Karlsson, and some kind of deal around that.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know who else you would think would want Petrie for right now at 6.25.
I mean, I don't know, that part I haven't thought too hard
Mm,
about, in terms of like what teams would want these players, Granlund, Teravainen types.
yeah,
I would say though that, you know Seattle, I don't know how much they would want a Petrie, but they probably want something back, even if they like the player a bit. Like, they know his value is low. Like, they're not going to just take his
probably not.
6.25 million straight up, especially for 2 years. They might
Mm,
take it at the trade deadline next year when it's an expiring contract. And Petrie has shown in like the last year and a half that he's still a competent, legitimate, NHL player or top four defenseman or whatever,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
But so yeah, you had to trade something, and that's why I guess that's my general argument against rerouting these guys, especially if you got like, if you get a first or equivalent back, if you get an Owen Pickering, you get a first for Petrie and Granlund, right?
Hmm.
Like, that's sort of their value out there, right? That you got to attach a first with them. So why, if you're Seattle, would you take just like a second or third back? I
Yeah,
don't
or
really
maybe
get
there's like a deal where there is some going to Seattle as well, or something
Right,
like
right, right.
they
We have to do
attach a
something
value.
extra,
Yeah,
I think. Yeah. Instead of
yeah,
like just they get the worst pick and they take on the contract.
yeah,
And the Sharks get to keep the first round pick or pickering, because that doesn't, yeah,
yeah.
that doesn't quite make as much sense to me.
But Teravainen, I think, does still have a little bit of
Yeah.
value. So
Yeah,
he would
no,
be one
that's
that,
fair.
like, maybe if the Sharks didn't want to use him, they could try and go somewhere else with him.
Yeah, or Teravainen has
Granlund is,
a no
oh,
trade too. He's got a 10-team no trade, so who
yep.
knows if the Sharks are on there or not. And like I said, in my proposal, might have been a little aggressive adding a third round pick as sort of the sweetener with Teravainen, because he's close enough and young enough to like his prime where
Hmm.
maybe it doesn't even require that much, in terms of a sweetener like that.
Yeah, and the other option is basically where these go to your normal cap dump places, like
Hmm.
they go to Arizona, or they go to Chicago recently, or they go
Hmm.
to Columbus, or whoever's taking on bad contracts for this year, and that's also an option as well, where they get paid to
Yeah.
do.
I wanted, yeah, we'll talk about it in a little bit though, in terms of just different
Mhm.
candidates. And, I've reached out to a couple of people in terms of just like where they sort of are in terms of, in terms of doing that,
Mhm.
like this summer.
So I think it's a possibility. I like the idea better of a retention player, like, place for Carlson, because I think that's a more interesting topic of discussion. So let's transition to that if you're okay with it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Just the pure retention one. Right. So,
Yeah, because we can kind of
um,
pick teams out for Petrie and Granlund and all
right.
that, and try and move them to places. But at the end of the day, it's just going to be paying to take them on, or getting them for free. And did we be like shooting, darts at a dartboard, kind of?
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, you don't want to get something for Petrie and then have to give something up to kind of,
Yeah, feels
yeah.
counterproductive.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So, but I don't know. But in terms of just, okay, so I had this idea, like, one of the kind of consistent themes that we have heard throughout this is that the Sharks do not want to retain that much. Like, it's Hassel's money and all that stuff,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it is his money. Easy for us to spend his millions, right? So,
Yeah.
um, so I had the idea of, well, maybe a third team can retain on Carlson's contract along with the Sharks,
Mhm.
and so in effect, the Sharks wouldn't have to retain as much. And if you keep the amount low enough for the third team, that they would not notice it as much, kind of,
Mhm. Okay.
And so my idea was sort of like, well, maybe a team would retain on Carlson for 1 million AAV for 4 years, leaving the
Mhm.
Sharks. Let's say the Sharks retain, or let's say 40% of Carlson's contract is retained in total. The Sharks would retain 3.5 million, which is maybe a little more realistic than the Sharks retaining 4.5. At least the way the Sharks sound, their posture, and and Hassel's money, and all that
Mhm.
sort of stuff. Um, so yeah, I don't couldn't think of looking a little bit of quite a deal like that, where a team retained a low amount but for a long time, and it was sort of a straight up deal too. Like I think Ekman Larson, in the
Sure.
original deal from Arizona to Vancouver, that Arizona retained a very little amount for like 6 years or something like that, right? But there
Mhm.
are so many moving parts in that deal that it's hard to figure out what the value of basically 6 years, and I think a total of like 5 million, 5.5 retained,
Yeah.
what the value of that is in terms of like draft capital, right? And so that's
Mhm.
what I kind of pulled at.
And it was kind of like there was cap dumps going both ways, right? Like Ekman
Yeah,
Larsson
yeah,
went
yeah,
one
yeah.
way, then like Beagle and Roussel and I don't remember who else came the other way. It was difficult to figure out exactly what the
It's
value
hard to
was.
use as a comp, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I also try to figure out some candidates, right? And obviously, like Chicago is that it was is a usual suspect. They took on, I think, Josh Bailey for 5 million left for one more year, and the
Mhm.
cost was a second round pick. The Islanders sent a second round pick with Bailey, so give you a sense of what 1 year 5 million might be worth in terms of retention these days. Um, Anaheim, because Anaheim, we're not really sure their direction because they struggled last year, like the Sharks.
Sure.
Philadelphia, maybe. A couple people told me Philadelphia, and Philadelphia appears to be going through a rebuild themselves.
Philly's my
Um,
Philly would be my interesting one because the Philly
mhm,
does make sense, right? They're going to wait 3 more years for Mitchkov to come
sure,
over. They're going through a rebuild, like work trading the guys that we need to trade, kind of
right.
thing. It's going to be the timeline fits, right? The only issue, and this is like I don't know if it's a real thing or not, is they're giving Erik Karlsson to Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Pittsburgh kind of like it's kind of like
Well, maybe it's
a little
Carolina to
bit of
give
a
them to too,
rivalry.
right? So
Yeah, or Carolina. But like either way, it's trading, him to your division. Is that a thing that Philadelphia is going to care about?
yeah.
Traditionally,
It
yes. These days, who knows?
It is worth noting too, and actually, the kind of the fifth team on my list
Mhm.
was Montreal, possibly, or fourth team was Montreal, and my
Sure,
last team was everybody's favorite cap dump, landfill, Arizona.
sure.
And four of these teams, though, worth noting: Chicago, Philadelphia, and Montreal, Arizona, already have retention spots committed elsewhere.
Mm,
So you only get three retention spots. So they all have one from the retaining on somebody.
yep.
So that could be a limiting thing. But anyway, I just want to jump into these different candidates. Though I talked with Mark D'Amico. He is a Montreal Hockey Now reporter. I asked about Montreal. He said no, he doesn't think that
Nope.
Corton and Hughes are really would be into that. This is interesting. I checked in with Arizona. Like I said, they've been doing a lot of this over the years, but it sounds like they're kind of distancing themselves from it, And this summer they did make some moves that are signal
Yeah.
that they're trying to win some games, finally. Signing Jason Zucker and Alex Kerfoot in the free agency market. They traded for Sean Dursey.
Yep.
So those are moves of a team that is trying to maybe do something here. And anyway, Craig Morgan, he's everything Arizona Coyotes, right? Craig Morgan of PHNX Sports, he said, when I asked him, like, is Arizona, are they still taking on bad contracts for picks? And he said, highly unlikely. Bill Armstrong told him that while they haven't closed the door on taking on bad contracts, it's not something that they're pursuing anymore. As they're moving on to the next stage of the rebuild, which they are clearly moving on to another stage of the rebuild with sort of the money they spent this summer. So,
For sure,
yeah, the way Craig said it was that it would have to be a return that knocked their socks off for them to consider it. And so then I thought, well, my next question was then, well, what is a equitable return, or what's a return that'll knock your socks off if the retention is 1 million, a low amount per year, right? 1 million AAV, if it was for 1 or 2 years, any team in the league would take that on. If it's like for any, like even for like a 4th round pick, they might do it, if it's that, that low AAV amount. But for 4 years, though, that's sort of the problem. That's the the fly in the ointment, so to speak. And again, a big part of it is because, just to repeat, that there's just 3 retention spots, so you don't want to tie up a retention spot, into the 3rd and 4th year, and you want to use it for something else. And so teams are just okay. So the next person I talked to, I actually asked Craig his opinion, and then I asked a scout his opinion of, like, well, what is fair for something like this that we've never quite seen a comp for. Again, a small amount for 4 years, and both Craig and the scout passed on even offering a suggestion. Because we just haven't seen it. We have no idea. And Craig did have the excellent suggestion of, well, talk to a cap guy. And good thing I have a cap guy. Hart Levine, Puckpedia, great dude. And Puckpedia, fantastic site, fantastic resource, right? So Hart took on the challenge, and he said that, like, he said that, and like we sort of been alluding to, that teams just don't want to commit dead cap space for that many years in the future. Like 4 million, that's the total over 4 years, right? For Karlsson retention, in my sort of idea, right? In my scheme, that's not 4 million. Retained is not a lot, but every team in a league, it'll be much easier time to find a team to take 4 million over 2 years. 2 million AAV a year, as opposed to over 4 years. And it's that commitment of limited retention spot. And so anyway, he offered this as sort of, well, what's a sort of a reasonable overpay that would get someone's attention, where they would be like, well, it is for 4 years, but just for 1 million, so let's do it. And he suggested basically a 2nd round pick and a 4th round pick, which sounds pretty rich for for just 4 million of retention. But again, though, we're spacing it out over 4 years. You're taking up someone's retention spot for 4 years, right?
Yeah.
And so he said that even that kind of value, which is a pretty good value on the surface, like, teams would still be hesitant for that. And anyway, just to wrap up the point about all this, about the 3rd team idea, right? I think obviously, ideally, like, a lot of fans, they've said, like, oh, why don't the Sharks just retain 50% of Karlsson's contract, get it done with, retain as much as possible, get as much as possible back. Once again, though, it's Hassel's money. And Hassel may not want to spend close to $24 million watching Erik Karlsson, win a Stanley Cup with the Penguins. I don't know, right? And so, so it doesn't matter what we think, kind of, oh, this is the most reasonable. This is, like, on the surface, to me, like, even though it's sort of my idea, like, I don't get it. Why would you have a team retain for 1 million for 4 years and send out a 2nd round pick when you could just retain it yourself? But
it might be a principle of the thing. It also might be a signifier that they just don't want to be dealing with $5 million of Erik Karlsson 4 years from now. Maybe they see the Sharks in just a completely different place, and competing for big free agents. Who knows what in terms
Who
of their
knows? Yeah.
their type of thing is. They just want to move on from like the past, era of San Jose
Yeah.
Sharks hockey. And if you're stuck with paying Erik Karlsson $5 million a year for the next 4 years, it doesn't really move on. It feels like it
Yeah.
kind of feels like you're stuck. So it might just be more of a feeling thing than anything. The last
Yeah,
quick thing
I'm
about
not I'm not quite sure, but I
yeah,
would say though that that
the last thing about the retention slot I wanted to
oh
mention
sure.
too is
Yeah, go
is
ahead. Hmm.
it's one of the few things in the NHL that is like a finite commodity, right? Like teams only have three of them, and
Hmm.
teams can leverage those every single trade deadline, right? You can leverage them and get an extra fourth, five,
Sure.
six round pick, whatever, um, every single year. And teams do that. They'll take on 3 bad contracts, or they'll fill up the retention slots for the just that little 2 month period, and then they'll be
Hmm.
done. An interesting thing, and I found this out. After Oliver Ekman-Larsson was bought out, is that the retention
Oh,
slot
sure. Yeah. Hmm.
eaten up by the length of the buyout. So instead of the Coyotes having a retention slot being eaten up until 2027 when they retained on Ekman-Larsson, it's eaten up until 2031. They have one
Right.
slot for 8 more years, basically, that
Right.
they can't use.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
that's a risk, basically, whenever you to ask a team to, hey, take on $1 million, here's a second and a fourth. If Erik Karlsson gets bought out by his new team that they're not even in control of, their retention slot gets doubled for
Right.
however
Of
many
course.
years.
Yeah.
So it's a finite commodity that you're asking a team to take on that risk of, passing up on future capital, or, players they just need to get retained on to trade
Right.
in a, I think it's a little bit unrealistic just from that slot perspective.
Sure. No,
You
that's
can
fair.
pay them,
Yeah. Yeah.
but unless you can pay them a lot. But I think
Yeah, and like I said, yeah, like it's something that you probably had to overpay for,
Mhm. And why
and
not just do it
because of how
yourself?
long it is, and why, yeah, why overpay it when you can just
Mhm.
take on the money yourself? But once again, though, it's not our money, and
Yeah.
and maybe it's just a time thing. Maybe
Mhm.
Hasso and Mike Greer, like they need to see over time that they really do need to retain more. Like there just isn't the interest
Sure.
at Karlsson at say 9.5 million per year or whatever.
Mhm.
And maybe in a month or so they'll, kind of, start to be more aggressive toward moving him. I do think, I guess, to wrap up everything about Karlsson, we're going to move on and talk about Filip Zadina and that signing in a second. But like, um, I still think a trade is going to happen this summer.
Mhm.
Um, Again, the Sharks want it, Carlson wants it,
Sure.
and you don't want to keep a guy around that doesn't want to be there. That's just not, even if
No.
he's still playing hard and still trying his best and trying to be a good teammate and whatever. It's just not something that you want in general. You want to move on as a franchise, even if you're retaining something, right? You still want to move on a little bit as a franchise and have a team of guys there that want to be there and are
Yeah.
pulling on the same kind of rope or whatnot, right?
Sure.
And I also mentioned too that it's kind of granted, Carlson doesn't have the same cachet in San Jose as Brent Burns did, and so I think that's another additional reason why, even though the return for Burns was light, that you
Mhm.
really, for everything that Brent Burns has done for the Sharks,
Sure.
11 years, and leading them in a lot of defensive categories in terms of scoring and whatever, right, and being the first Sharks defenseman to win a Norris and all kinds of stuff, right, that you don't hold a guy, like
Yeah.
hostage basically with San Jose until like the trade deadline just to extract, just a little bit more out of the deal, out of a deal. And it's,
Yeah.
I don't think that would have been the right thing for my career. Granted, Carlson again doesn't have the cachet in San Jose that Burns does, but Carlson is a is a in the sort of the spectrum of the NHL. He's obviously a huge star,
Yeah.
and
For
teams
sure.
and other agents, players see how you treat guys like that. And Carlson wanted to go last trade deadline, right? But they held on to him because they didn't like the offers they were getting or the retention that they're being asked. And
Yeah.
Carlson, you know, didn't say a word, didn't really complain, didn't show, much of any sort of discontent. He just kept scoring points. He got to 100, got his Norris Trophy, right?
Sure.
Stayed healthy too, to his credit. And so you're asking them to kind of just do it again and like, okay, build up that value again so we can get instead of a third round pick, a second round pick, or instead of Ty Smith, get Owen Pickering, and yeah, you can ask a guy to do that, and he has no option to go anywhere else in a sense, right? But at a certain point, though, it just you just gotta let a guy go, and the offers aren't there. It's because the market isn't there, even if you wanted to be there, even if he did win the 2023 Norris Trophy.
Yeah,
And
that's very
so
true.
yeah, so I feel like I feel like it has to come to some kind of head, and they just have to trade him, even if it's not.
Yeah.
And I
I
wrote in
mean,
my Hurricanes proposal yesterday.
you're right. It's basically just time to move on, I think, in terms of that saga. And I don't want to I want to see Erik Karlsson playing winning hockey, because he's
Yeah,
at his best when he's putting a team on his back and winning games. And
yeah.
like,
When he's
you know,
when he has
Sharks
like
aren't
a
doing
good
it.
reason to kind of kill himself out there and risk injury. I mean, you want
Yeah.
that for any player. You
Yeah.
want them to risk themselves for a reason.
And we also
And
put ourselves in the mind of us a year ago when we were like, yes, take Erik Karlsson for
oh,
free, please.
for free,
Exactly.
yeah, we'll retain 2 million, and
Yeah.
you're not give us anything. What a bargain for us.
Yeah. Right. No bad cap dumps or nothing. You just want him. Sure. Take him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
take them,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like a deal will happen because of
Hmm.
all those different kind of pressures eventually.
Sure.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I guess I don't mind keep talking about it, but of course, at a certain point, we just won't have much to say about it anymore, and we'll just
It's
sort
true.
of,
We've
uh,
spent an hour this week, and I think actually every week
yeah.
we'll spend an hour on Garrett Carlson.
Yeah,
No, I'm
probably,
kidding. It depends. If
probably,
it gets
but
traded,
yeah, I guess
maybe we'll.
a last thought on it is,
Yeah.
and I wrote it. I was about to say I wrote in the Carolina Hurricanes article or Hurricanes trade proposal that I don't see the Sharks' position here as trying to win the Erik Karlsson trade here. There is
Sure.
no win. Erik Karlsson is going to be the best player in any deal.
Yeah.
You're not going to get a future Erik Karlsson in the deal back unless you draft really well with the draft pick you get,
Sure.
obviously. But
Get really
like
lucky.
the prospect you get, the actual initial player you get back, be it a Ty Smith or Owen Pickering or um, Jeff Petrie or whatever, right? Our Carlson is going to be the best deal player in the deal, hands down. Um, you're not trying to win this deal. I mean, yeah, you're trying to get the best possible deal under the circumstances, but you have to remember there are a lot of circumstances here limiting Carlson's trade value. You're
Yeah.
in a different reality of thinking of things. I think if you think that, why are we giving away the 2023 Norris Trophy winner for just Jack Drury and a first round pick? There's a
Yeah.
lot of different, limiting factors to Carlson's trade value. And so, yeah. So again, I don't
Sharks are
see
gonna have to
the
give up
Sharks'
to
goal
get.
to try to win. Yeah.
Yeah. They're gonna have to give up to get is basically it.
Yeah. Yeah. And try to get like a decent package that can
Mhm.
help your team out. And even like the Hurricanes and Burns example, right? Like if McIniemi pans out, which
You might.
maybe not likely, but he could, right? And they were able to flip Lawrence for a pretty good player in Anthony Duclair. They're able to trade up from Lawrence, right? So if you get
Mhm.
guys that like that, it starts to look a little better. And the same thing can happen with Carlson. You get you get what you can get back for Carlson at this point, and then you move up from there. You trade up from there.
Yeah. All right. We're closing the book on Erik Karlsson. We have a few more topics before we get into the Nico Sturm interview.
Just a couple.
Just a few. Quick notes, I'd say.
Yeah,
First
quick
one
notes.
is Filip Zadina signed a $1.1 million by 1 year contract in San Jose.
Hmm.
Um, this was interesting, right? So Zadina was waived, right, and was basically for free. He had 1.8 million, I think it was, times 2 years left on his contract in Detroit, after being a very high draft pick for them a few years ago.
Sorry, yeah,
Didn't-
the 1.825 was in
That's it.
AAV, so not in
Yeah,
actual cash.
1.825 AAV for 2 years. He was
Mhm.
waived. Nobody wanted him at that
Right.
price. Then they agreed to a mutual termination, which is, you know, Filip basically betting on himself that he's going to go to a different team and make, not the exact same amount of money, but enough money that 1.8 and enough of
Well,
a
he didn't walk away from the
year.
AAV amount. That's why I
Yeah,
mentioned the difference. Like he walked away
sure.
from 4.56 million, so a bit more than
Yeah.
the AAV times 2.
Yeah. So it's like an extra 800,000 even above that, So yeah, basically he's walking away from guaranteed cash, betting on himself, and then he signs in San Jose. I like the overall feel of that story. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
He was drafted as kind of a goal scorer, right? So he had 44 goals in his draft year, only like 38 assists in his draft year as well, which is very rare for a prospect to not have more assists than goals, unless they are mostly a pure goal scorer. And Zadina never really kind of translated that. He said he's going to fill a lot of nets in the NHL. It was a very publicized quote that he said. And then it hasn't happened yet, right? I think his highest goal
Yeah.
total was like 10.
10.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it
So,
correct to my memory is that he was thought of like he was going to be like a surefire 30 goal guy. Maybe not like
yeah.
40, 50, but like 30 was a pretty
People
good
are like,
safe
there's
number.
going to be your Tarasenko or your,
Mm,
Line A kind of guy who's going to just,
yeah.
put a bunch of goals up and that's it. And it never really panned out. So Sharks, I think, needed goal scorers. They got rid of
Sure.
Timo. They basically just don't have a lot of players that are, we'll call it goal inclined, right? got a lot of playmakers, not a lot of shooters, right? So they
Yeah.
got Duclair last week, and then this week added Zadina, hopefully to add some more goals. But
Sure.
what do you think about this signing, Sheng?
Well, it is funny to think. I just thought about it a little while ago that the two big goal scorers that they've added this summer, Zadina and Duclair, I think combined for 5 goals last year.
Really gonna light up the net or light up the light of the light? Yep.
Well, I know that's not fair though. Duclair has scored 31 and 3-time 20 goal scorer, and obviously Zadina just 23. So
Mhm.
maybe he can find his game. Anyway, I've written quite a bit about Zadina. Just actually had an article come out. Just talked with a few scouts. Talked with a coach, talked with the executive sort of about Zadina's like outlook and potential and that sort of thing. So yeah, so most people agree, this is a good upside play for them.
Yeah.
And it is cool too that his agent, Zadina's agent, Darren Ferris, told me that Zadina had higher dollar offers, but he wanted to go to San Jose after talking to David Quinn. So that's kind of a feather in Quinn's cap. And one of the things that talking with the sources that I talked to about Zadina is that he's a good kid, but like confidence, was perhaps an issue with him. And
Sure.
even he alluded to it in his availability a couple
Mhm.
days ago with San Jose media about like trying to get back to the player that the good player that he was.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think confidence was an issue with him. And one thing that I think David that I've seen is that he's a guy that tries to give guys confidence, tries to keep them positive. Doesn't always work out, obviously. Obviously we saw Kevin LeBanc last year, a
Sure.
little up and
Sure.
down there, obviously. But
Yeah.
I think David tries though. I think that's the approach he takes. Tries to have good
Yeah.
relationships with all his players, communicates with them on a fairly regular basis. And so I think I can see this as being really can work out for both parties. There's opportunity in San Jose. David's the kind of coach that I think will keep Zadina's spirits up and confidence up. And hopefully that all adds up to filling up the net. So
Yeah. And the Sharks needed just some more winger help, and I think this is going to
right.
be an interesting swing for them. To see if they can rebuild his career. And I believe he's still going to be an RFA after this year as well, even though he was had a mutual termination, right? I think he's still an RFA.
Yeah, he goes back. Because he's under
Yeah.
27, so he goes back
Yeah.
to
The Sharks will have his
RFA.
rights, either way. If they decide, if he has a great year, you sign him for a longer deal. Makes sense
Hmm.
on a rebuilding team to get a young guy. So I like the
Right.
signing. I think everybody kind of universally liked it. So
Yeah.
our other signing of the week is Kasper Haltunnen, Sharks' second round pick from the 2023 draft, was signed to his ELC, which is
Hmm.
interesting because it kind of came out of nowhere. It felt like Musty had that big, prospect camp, and it felt like Haltunnen had a fine game, but it didn't feel like he was the star of the show. And then out of nowhere, Haltunnen gets his 3-year ELC. I was thinking about this, and it was kind of like just a question of where Haltunen's going to play next year, right?
Sure.
He is, he's drafted out of Finland for HIFK, right?
Mm-hmm.
Helsinki's team. And he, during the men's league play, had 1 point in 27 games and played one assist. And he played pretty much like either between 0 and 10 minutes a night, from what I could tell in his game sheets. Occasionally he'd get like 12 or 13, but he was mostly playing bottom pairing or replacement level minutes for the men's team. He had great totals in his J20, his juniors team, basically in Finland, but he wasn't playing a whole lot in the men's league. So is there a chance here that maybe he's not going back to Finland and maybe he's coming over to North America?
Yeah, I actually at first, when someone asked me about it on Twitter, and I was writing Erik Karlsson trade proposal stories.
Yeah,
so I didn't really dig on it, but I started asking people today about it because you mentioned it, and actually I think that I think it's fair to say that things are up in the air, maybe.
Sure.
One thing actually, I was just curious. So the London Knights are the team associated with Haltunnen, I think, or a lot, or that's who asked me, a London Knights fan, I think. And the Knights selected Haltunnen in the import draft last year, 35th, and I found this very interesting, actually. And I wonder if there's if you did some digging, like how often this happens. But Halton, of course, signed his ELC on that's Wednesday, and the London Knights on their Twitter tweeted out, "Congratulations to Kasper Haltunen on signing with the San Jose Sharks." Which
London is a bit of a, like, I won't call them crazy, but they are a very passionate OHL fan base.
Oh,
like,
sure.
It's a super passionate team. So,
but I think it's interesting that maybe a London Knights fan could fill me out on this because I don't follow the London Knights Twitter, but for the London Knights Twitter to be publicly congratulating a prospect of theirs that was not thought of, even though he had the rights. I don't know. Maybe they do that for all their imports, and it's just their sort of their welcome mat thing. I actually don't know, but I just saw this right now because I was actually curious, like where they drafted him in the CHL import draft last year. So I just saw that, right there, that they sent a congratulatory tweet, and then the first response from somebody is, "The ship hasn't sailed yet. Stay tuned." So anyway. One of my sources did tell me that pre-draft, it seemed certain that Haltunen would go back to HIFK, and that was also the team's belief as well. But things may have changed, after talking to the Sharks. The may is a very key word there. So if you're going to try to steal that information, the may is a very key word there. But he also noted that, in his opinion, for kind of where Haltunen is in his development, that London does seem more realistic than the AHL. Haltunen probably isn't quite there, whereas, like what David Juracek did that, right? Like, hop straight to the AHL. I don't know if he's quite there for that or ready for that.
Or
we'll see during camp.
Yeah.
But
the same thing, came over from Europe and played in the AHL right away.
Oh, right. He had a great year, right? Yeah.
Yeah, great year.
But yeah, I don't know if Haltunen is going to be that. But anyway, so those are a couple of tidbits. So yeah, it does seem like, indeed, again, it is up in the air. I thought like it was sort of a given that he'd be going there, but going back to Finland, but maybe not.
Maybe not. I have two thoughts on this. Just my own personal thoughts. So the first is that this isn't the first time that a prospect drafted out of Finland has moved over recently, right? So Thomas Hamara was drafted last year, I think, by Ottawa, and I think he's a Czechoslovakian or Czech player who played in Finland. He came over and now plays in Kitchener Rangers in the OHL. after having like basically the similar thing where he's playing lower down in the men's league in Finland.
Not a lot of minutes.
Not a lot of minutes, exactly. And then came over and he's playing on, higher up minutes for the
Right.
OHL team. Same thing happened with Brad Lambert, right? Brad Lambert had like a
Sure.
very precipitous drop in his draft year and all the way down to Winnipeg. And a lot of that was due to basically not playing a lot of minutes and not getting the opportunities that he thought or his agent thought or whoever thought he
Yeah.
should get in Finland, and came over, played a little bit in the AHL, and then eventually moved over to the WHL. So just two very, very recent, actually this
Mm.
year, prospects moving from Finland and playing in
Yeah,
Canadian
those
team.
are definitely interesting comps.
Yeah. And then the other thought is, I think that from my own perspective on Haltunen's play, I think he would benefit a lot from being in a system where he can be or he has more time to basically affect play offensively. I think his game is pretty simple in terms of getting the puck on net and everything. I think he needs a little bit more time to slow play down, and he won't get that in the Finnish league. Playing 9 minutes a night, he's going to get it if he's on the top power play, top line of
Right.
London. So maybe, but I think the other thing is it might come to fruition, or we might learn more during training camp, like where he's going to go. Maybe they don't know either. Maybe they're just like, we're going to figure it out as you go over the next few months and see where you're going to go after.
Right. And then yeah, like being Halton could also, he doesn't have to play for Liga. He can go, he can play a level below, but
Mm-hmm.
that level below, right? Probably the OHL, the London Knights are better challenge for him, right? Because
For sure.
Halton did appear, at least statistically, he dominated the lower levels, but
Yeah, it was
maybe
a goal per
those,
game in the
yeah,
J20 or the U20 in
right.
Finland. So I think
But
it's
that,
definitely not that league for him.
yeah, so that kind of makes sense. Like maybe the Sharks, yeah, like better, like you mentioned, play 18 minutes a night, 15 minutes a night in London,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to 9 a night for Helsinki.
Yeah. But those are pretty much I think our only signings, unless you remember any else from this week.
I don't think
Nope.
so.
I think that's it, right?
maybe we missed somebody, but sorry.
So we're gonna get to an interview that we did with Nico Sturm a few weeks back.
Mm.
To spoil when it was, but it's a pretty cool interview, and I think he had another quote to share about Gawanke before then. Did you want to read it out?
Yeah. So yeah, we talked to Nico. Maybe it was 3 weeks ago, a month ago, and mainly the main topic was that he had just won the silver medal at the World Championships. A great achievement, especially for
That's awesome.
a German team German national team that's still coming up in sort of the world hockey ranks. And so we wanted to talk to him mainly about that. And we touched on other things like, obviously the Sharks had a rough season, that sort of thing, right? And Nico, as you guys know, from this past season is, very expansive, great to talk to, always has an interesting opinion about whatever you ask of him.
Sure.
And anyway, with in terms of Gavanka, that would have been a question we would have asked if we had known that the Sharks were going to acquire Gavanka, but he and Gavanka were teammates on this silver medal winning World Championships team this past summer. And so Gavanka is a guy that he knows pretty well.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I was just curious, sort of get a sense of Gavanka's game and his NHL prospects, that sort of thing. And Nico was kind enough to supply this. He said that I think players like him are tough to find. Big right-handed shot defenseman. And he said, I am rooting for him. I think it will be up to him whether he makes the roster or not. But I think he now sees a legitimate chance to do just that. And that should give him the motivation that he needs. And if we think about Gavanka's sort of timeline with the Manitoba Moose, right? 4 years there, not a sniff of NHL action, even though he scored 20 goals from the blue line last year, right? And that's got to be a little dispiriting for a player, and probably why he signed with Adler Mannheim over the summer, because he thought, well, if Winnipeg's not going to give me a chance, I don't know if another team will. Yeah, what's the point of staying in
Sure.
the AHL and popping in 20 goals and not getting, one NHL game. And so definitely in San Jose at the moment, at least, if they trade Karlsson, like we talked about, I think last week about the Gawanke trade, they have no clear options on the power play after Karlsson. And so it could be Gawanke. And with that opportunity here in San Jose, maybe he does, kind of find that extra gear and stick in the NHL finally.
Yeah. It would be a very cool story, and I think obviously Nico's rooting for him. So
sure.
So let's hear from Nico, and I hope everybody has a good week for the next week. We'll be back probably a week from today, whenever this comes out, and we'll see you next time. Maybe with Erik Karlsson actual trade news. Maybe.
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 Do you think so?
No.
I don't think so.
that's my honest answer. I can't. I just more and more weeks. I think of time.
Yeah, more and more weeks. Do you think it's going to happen though?
I think it'll happen for sure.
Okay.
It's just about when. I think we're getting closer to like the August kind of thing, somewhere in there. More time.
Okay.
All right.
See you guys. Our next guest has had a pretty good calendar year. Last June, he won a Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche. Then he signed a 3-year contract with the Sharks and set career highs in goals and assists. And last month, he tied for the team lead on Team Germany with 6 goals at the World Championships, helping them to a silver medal. Let's welcome Nico Sturm to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
So, Nico, we wanted to congratulate you right away on the silver medal for Germany in the World Championships. Can you walk us through what that was like, or anything you want to share from that experience?
Yeah, it was obviously my first time playing for the men's team. I haven't put on the Germany sweater since the World Juniors. I think that was 2014, so almost 10 years. And we obviously got relegated at that tournament, and I think it was in Montreal and Toronto. So it was cool to put that sweater on. I had to put it off for a couple of years. In college, you always got your finals in May, and I said in college when they asked me, I just told them straight up I was focused on my schoolwork, and I wanted to put my effort and my emphasis on one thing at a time, and that my time with the national team would come. And then since turning pro, I've always been fortunate to play in the playoffs, right? And the opportunity just never arose until this year. And I was told him if I'm healthy and I'm available, I'm very excited and looking forward to playing. And it was didn't really know what to expect. Hadn't seen a lot of those guys in almost a decade. A lot of them I didn't even know at all. So it was fantastic. I missed, talking, speaking German in the locker room, and I definitely caught up with some of those guys, and just hearing things and stories around the German league here, which is just something that I don't get to experience throughout the year, and just how the guys feel in their clubs, and we came together so quickly, and it was amazing, an amazing experience. I packed for a long time. I definitely did not pack till the finals. I gotta be honest, and it was pretty surreal how fast the team came together in the camp. Team Germany, they put a lot of emphasis on these World Championships. Some of the guys, when their season ends in April, they're prepping for this tournament for 5-6 weeks. I think we played a total of 8 pre-tournament games, so a lot of work goes into that, and it's kind of the highlight of the year for Hockey Germany, I would say.
Not only did you play, but you tied for the team lead on Team Germany with 6 goals. Do you feel like the offensive confidence that you got throughout the year carried over to the Worlds, like from San Jose, playing a bigger role in everything?
Yeah, most importantly, I felt free. I think there was certainly some sort of expectation that I had for myself, that I wanted to be one of the best players out there. Every time I step on the ice, I think that's quite natural when you come as an NHL player onto a team that only has a handful of guys from North America. So you want to have that impact. Surely there was some sort of pressure as well. It comes with expectations from fans and coaches and teammates, I think. But overall, I felt pretty free. Honestly, I felt like there was no pressure at all. And I think the further we went in the tournament, the more fun I had. And yeah, like I said, I wanted to step out there, be the best version of myself, and have an impact, be one of the best players on the ice. And I think overall, I had a lot of fun. Definitely the fun aspect, which suffered a little bit this year in San Jose, just because the team success wasn't there. And these moments when we beat Switzerland in the quarters, or we beat the Americans in the semifinals, those moments when you have that big goal in overtime and the reaction on the bench, and we tied them in the last minute, when we pulled the goalies, those big moments in the big games, that's where you want to be at, right? And that's what we're trying to get back to in San Jose. And it was great having that feeling again. Very, very similar to that feeling that I had in those big playoff moments with Colorado the year prior. That's why you play the game. That's where you want to be at. And I'm hoping, I'm working hard that I can do my part in bringing us as an organization back to one of those moments, hopefully sooner than later.
Are you hard-boiling an egg there, Nico? I heard the ringer there.
Yeah, no, I just got a text. I'm trying to mute the distractions here on my computer. Here we go. I think I got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw pictures of you and your brothers and your family in the locker room after the gold medal game, and were they able to come out to watch you, for when during the cup run at all, or is that sort of the first time that they've been able to be part of like a really significant, like high level hockey moment for you?
So Taylor and my younger brother were there in Tampa when we won the cup. My parents obviously have been overseas a couple of times now to watch me play. They were not there for the cup run, but they've seen me play a couple times. For my older brother, it was actually the first time seeing me play live since I left Germany. So that was
wow.
That was quite I think he was in Prague last year when they were in San Jose. But it was it's cool having your family around. They were there, and I'm sure nobody in Germany had the expectations of us going all the way to the gold medal game. As a team, I think as an organization, we set out quarterfinals and the qualifications for the next Olympics as kind of our goal, making it past the group stage. And we obviously had a tough start playing Sweden, Finland, and the US right away, right at the gates. And we played fantastic in those 3 games. They were all very tight games where we felt like we could add some points. At the end of the day, we played great, but we were sitting there with 0 points. And then you go into the 4th game against Denmark, and this do or die game that you have to win your next 4 games against Denmark, Austria, Hungary, and France. So you got a lot of pressure moments, and the team overcame that. Very close-knit group, like I said before, and that's why you play the game. You want to play in those high-stake games, and sometimes it doesn't work out. Like in the gold medal game, we obviously lost that, but so many great moments that I take from that tournament, like that first crucial win against Denmark, overcoming Switzerland as a big underdog in the quarterfinals, and that overtime moment against the Americans, fighting back from a 2-0 deficit. It's fun. It was a lot of fun playing hockey, something that I haven't felt for a long time. Really, just the pure joy of the game of hockey was very special for me.
How would you compare that sort of the national pride from, especially like you mentioned, that it was an unexpected silver medal,
Right.
compared to winning a Stanley Cup, which is not so much a national thing, of course.
Right. It's different. It's the magnitude of the whole thing. You can kind of feel the build up throughout the whole tournament. At the start, there's like almost no attention on the tournament and the team back home because there weren't really any expectations for us. There was actually a lot of criticism before the tournament with regards to how the team was put together. We had a ton of guys, I think like a dozen guys that didn't come to the tournament, both from the NHL and the German league. So not a lot of people even from Germany were, having high hopes in terms of us going very far. And I don't think a lot of people even had quarterfinals in the stars for us. But I felt we got better as the pre-tournament stage went on, and then those first 3 games where we played those top teams, and I thought, man, this team's playing really good. We certainly went a lot further, and with every game that we went further, you could kind of sense that, there's more media coverage now back home, and it's like Germany surprisingly makes quarters, and it was like kind of like a hockey wonder when we beat Switzerland, and then all of a sudden we beat the Americans in the semifinals. And you read, I try to stay off social media for the most part, but you can just read all these comments online and media outlets that normally wouldn't cover us, where only when there's maybe a really big game, they focus on soccer and maybe other sports, other events. All of a sudden there would be media coverage about us, and we obviously have a long way to go with hockey in Germany. And it was great to see, I think, after the silver medal that the team won in 2018 at the Olympics, that the sport had a moment like this again. Huge. We need that more than anything. We need every article, every ounce of media coverage that we can get is so important for us here. So can't be overstated how important this tournament was for hockey in Germany.
And I'm wondering about just some of your teammates on Team Germany. Just wondering if there's anybody on a team, putting you on the spot a little bit, but, anybody who is not in an NHL organization right now, or a former, you can't say Dominique Calhoun because he played many years in the NHL, but anybody who, you just think, wow, this guy can fit into the league, like just somebody that maybe we don't know so much about.
Yeah, so I, a couple of guys, obviously, but there was a guy that was on our fourth line. He was Wojciech Stachowiak, and I honestly, truth be told, I never heard of him before. And they put him on the fourth line, and I thought he was amazing. This is played as a center, underrated skill and skating set. Was really good on the draws, really dug in. And from what I've heard, he's fielding offers from North America
awesome.
this summer, so he might come over. So I think that's always a great point of that the tournament has an opportunity for guys that maybe fly under the radar a little bit or play in the European leagues where they don't get that spot on coverage by the media or by the scouts, to show that in an 8 or 10 game tournament, they can maybe try to get their first NHL contract, get scouts to pay attention to them. So I think besides the team aspect, it's always a great opportunity for individuals to showcase themselves.
And kind of going off of that, with the draft season coming up, we wanted to ask about a few of the 2023 draft prospects, if you know who was playing at the World Championships. We had a few: Erik Karlsson, Adam Finley, and David Reinbacher. Did you have an opportunity to play against any of them, and any of your thoughts?
I obviously don't pay attention to other players as much as our team, but Karlsson, obviously, he played a big role for Team Sweden right out of the gate. So, for a prospect, I think the best indicator of how ready a player is or not for the National Hockey League is, has he played against men at the highest level or not? And I think junior hockey, college hockey, that's always one thing, but playing against men, against experienced guys that have played pro hockey for a decade, that's always a different thing. And if you can compete and produce and hold your own at that level, I think that's always the best sign for a player to take that step towards the National Hockey League. So again, great opportunity to showcase yourself, and I'm sure the scouts have picked a couple of players that they thought maybe fared better than others against men at that stage.
And Nico, I wanted to thank you so much for your time. Just winding up here, just a couple questions about the Sharks. Looking forward to next season. There are obviously a lot of rumors right now about Erik Karlsson possibly being traded, and I just wonder just your own personal approach to something like that. Is the prospect of something like that a bit, I don't know, a downer, just because it's going to make it harder probably to win games possibly? Or do you look at it more as, next man up? The team just has to come together more.
I look at it as, first of all, I have zero control over the whole situation. So I'm just as much in the passenger seat as you guys. And then I understand the business side of things. I understand where we're trying to go as an organization, and I understand that sometimes there are steps that are necessary that might hurt in the short term. I also understand that Carl wants to win right now, and he wants to have a chance to compete for a cup, and deservingly so. He's done great things in his league, and I think he's deserving of that opportunity. That being said, of course, if your best player leaves the team, it's hard to imagine that we're going to be better off next season than we were the season prior. If you're a guy that puts up 100 points leaves you, right?
Right.
That being said, it might be the case. It might not be the case. We have to find a way to move forward as an organization next year and take a step towards the playoffs. Try to find a way to be in the hunt for a playoff spot longer than we were last year. And whether that's with Carl or without him, I certainly love having him on the team. I won't be mad if he's there again. So it's out of my control, out of your control. I put my trust in our management and Greersy that they have a plan to put this organization in a better position over the long term. That's why I signed here for 3 years, and whether that's with Carl or without him, we'll see come probably around the draft time. I'm sure we'll have a better idea.
And here's another I'm not a GM answer or something you can answer with that with that answer. But I'm just curious though, just with this Sharks team, your evaluation, just because you are on the inside of it, obviously, and you've talked about just like winning teams, like everybody kind of knows their job, kind of. And so I guess my question is like, what type of players? I'm not asking about specific players. I'm not asking to tamper here or anything, but what type of players do you think the Sharks need more of to just be more competitive and win more games? Is there a type, knowing the team's strengths and weaknesses as you do?
Well, I think it's a little far-fetched, but ultimately I think you need sort of a game, like a guy that can put the team on his back at any given moment. Like we had that in Colorado with Kale and Mac, obviously. That being said, I know those guys aren't very easy to find, and I think even if you draft in the first 5, 6, 7 picks, it's not a guarantee that a player is going to turn into a Kale McCarr or Nathan McKinnon. I think ultimately you do need those guys, though. I think if the tournament that I just played has shown me one thing, is that at least over the short run, the team can compensate for that by coming together and playing a team-structured game. Our roster certainly wasn't probably favored to win a medal at that tournament, and we found a way anyways to win and compete against all the teams that on paper were better than us. I know that's going to be harder over an 82-game season than a 10 or 12-game tournament. But even in the games that we didn't win, we were competitive. And I actually thought for the most part we did that last year with our group.
Mhm.
I think we fell off a little bit in the second half of the year. Certainly towards the trade deadline and after, I didn't think we were that competitive of a group anymore, to be honest with you. So again, whether that's, I don't know what the group is going to look like. We got to find a way to be a team that nobody wants to play against, and stay in games and in the playoff picture longer than we were last year. And we'll see what the group looks like, but I think that's certainly possible without star players. Ultimately, if you look, and that's very far ahead at winning a cup, you do need those type of players. So I think that's I'm convinced of that.
And I think I know we're running short on time here a little bit. We just want to get a final answer. How's the rest of your summer looking? Do you have any specific plans before we get out of here?
No, I just took 2 weeks. Kind of when I was on vacation in the
Eating dessert.
Yeah,
Eating
with my girlfriend and my two best buddies, and I kind of do some light workouts while I'm on vacation. But now I just I'm going to finish my first full week of workouts tomorrow. So I got the first week under my belt again, and getting after it pretty hard. And then staying off the ice a little while longer, doing off-ice stuff mostly. I think that's where the biggest gains are at for me right now, because I stayed on the ice for so long and I played pretty much till the end of May. I can stay off the ice a little while longer, doing my shooting and my stick handling off the ice, and my heavy lifting right now. Trying to get some explosiveness back is something that suffers usually throughout the year. And then I think towards the end of July, I'm gonna ramp up the skating again, and the off ice workouts and the heavy lifting. The off ice conditioning is gonna make ways for the on ice conditioning. And I'm gonna stick around here in Germany probably until first week of August, and then head back to the US and wrap up my summer there with my skating coach and work out there for another 3 or 4 weeks, like I have been doing the last couple of weeks, kind of a boot camp before the season starts, and that's usually been very good for me. So that's my plan: Germany for another month and a half, and then wrap up the summer in Minnesota.
Awesome. Well, Nico, thank you so much for your time, and good luck with all the workouts and stuff. Congratulations again on the silver medal, and I'll see you in September in San Jose.
Sounds good. See you soon, guys.
Congrats,
Take it
Nico.
easy.